Hello, everybody, and welcome. On behalf of BMAC and our partners, the National Research Council Industrial Research Assistance Program, I'd like to thank you for joining us today. I'm Sean DeVries, the Executive Director of the Battery Metals Association of Canada. It's my pleasure to welcome you to our latest Mining Innovation Showcase, Alberta's Path to First Commercial Lithium. So before we get started, I'd like to remind everybody to please mute your line to avoid any background noise. Please feel free to use the chat function should you have any questions throughout the presentation, and we're going to take some time after to address as many of those as we can at the end. So I want to acknowledge I'm joining you today from Barrie, Ontario, which is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe people, which include the Ottawa, the Ojibwe, and the Potawatomi nations, collectively known as the Three Fires Confederacy, also the Wendat Nation Huron. So shortly, we're going to turn it over to our guests here from E3 for the feature presentation, and it's going to be followed by some Q&A. And then we're going to finish off with a session with a lightning pitch with a lithium-related IRAP client on their technology. So of course, I'd like to thank our partners in this, NRC IRAP. This technical symposium is made possible by the financial contribution from the mining sector team at NRC IRAP, which is the National Research Council Industrial Research Assistance Program. If you'd like to connect with NRC IRAP, please contact Peter Howell. You see his email address there on the screen, and Alexandra, pardon me, will put that into the chat as well. So we have a great group of participants with us today from a number of different organizations right across the sector. So I'd like to extend a warm welcome to all of you. All right, we're going to be moving on here to our presentation. So for this presentation, I'm pleased to be joined by our guests, Chris Doornbos and Robin Boschman. Chris is an entrepreneur, aviator, and founder of emerging ideas and technology with a passion for collaboration and innovation. He's the founder of E3 Lithium, world-leading lithium resource and technology development company. Chris emphasizes risk management, developing and managing an exceptional technical team, and well-strategized project generation with a clear focus on developing and capturing value for shareholders. And Robin has more than 15 years of experience in external relations in energy and utility sectors. Her experience involves leading communications teams and strategies in private, public, and global organizations spanning investor relations, media relations, crisis communication, financial communication, employee and stakeholder relations, marketing, and PR, and social investment. So Chris and Robin, welcome, and I'm going to turn it over to you for your presentation.
Thank you, Sean, very much. I will share our presentation and then get started. Okay, can I have a quick confirmation my screen is looking good?
You look great.
Okay, thank you so much, Sean, Alexandra. Thank you to BMAC, and thank you to Natural Resources Canada and IRAP for having us today. We are very excited to share with you a little bit about E3 Lithium for all of you who might be new to the story. We're going to talk about direct lithium extraction technology and how it has matured over the last several years, certainly. And also we're going to wrap that into Alberta's path to first commercial lithium. E3 is leading that charge, and we're very excited to be doing so. So looking forward to share more information with you. Sean introduced both Chris and I, so I will breeze past those introductions and we'll move directly into the presentation. The only quick note I wanted to make prior to moving into it is that E3 is hosting a webinar tomorrow as well. That is really going to be more of an in-depth dive into our plans for 2024 and a project update. So if you joined today thinking that it was tomorrow's webinar, hoping for more of that in-depth dive into E3's project development, just for full transparency, want to let you know that today is really about the IRAP, the NRCan presentation, high level focusing on technology and how we are proceeding towards commercial lithium in Alberta. So of course, welcome to stay here and join both if you would like, but today is a little bit different from tomorrow. In terms of what we're going to be covering today. So we're going to do a quick introduction to E3 Lithium. Both Chris and I are going to be sharing the discussion with you today. So I'll introduce you to the company, give a little bit of a background, and we're going to talk about the market outlook and EV adoption outlook. Much has been said as of late about the adoption of EVs, and we're going to bring to you some recent research and give you our take, being a lithium development company in Alberta, privy to many conversations with policymakers and off-takers. So we'll share a little bit about our view on the adoption outlook. We then are going to talk about the global landscape of DLE technologies. We're going to talk about how they have matured, but we're also going to talk about their long history, which some may not know how far back their roots go in terms of their development. So we'll share a little bit about that. We're then going to bring it to E3 Lithium and Alberta in particular. We're going to talk about our testing and our success with direct lithium extraction technology and how that unlocks our vast resource in Alberta. And we're going to wrap that into how that brings us towards future commercial lithium and the first commercial lithium plant in Alberta. And we're going to wrap it up on some of the many great reasons there are to be a Canadian company, an Albertan company, and some of the real bright things we see about the future operating in Western Canada. So about E3 Lithium, for anybody who may not be aware, we are headquartered in Calgary in Alberta, and our permit areas are between Alberta's two largest cities, Edmonton and Calgary. We have Canada's largest high confidence, as indicated by measured and indicated resources of lithium resources in Canada. So we actually have what we have in our subsurface brine. It's located about 2.5 kilometers underground, and we produce it using conventional oil and gas equipment and the energy workers and the skill set developed in Alberta. The size of our resource is actually 5 times greater than the rest of Canada's measured and indicated resources, primarily found in hard rock resources out east. So it's a massive resource. And in addition to the measured and indicated categories, we have about 900,000 tons in inferred in Alberta, with more than 30% of our permit area left to be outlined with a resource. And we also have assets in Saskatchewan. So the opportunity here in Alberta is massive, and we're very excited to be leading the charge. E3 was founded by Chris in 2016, and we have been working to develop our resource and DLE technology concurrently to be able to unlock what we have. Last year was a very big year for E3 Lithium and DLE technology in Alberta, in that we de-risked the extraction technology through our 2023 field pilot plant. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that. I won't share too many details here, but direct lithium extraction technology is the key to unlocking the resources that we have, and is really seen as the future of brine resources. So many of you know that the way that lithium is produced today primarily is through hard rock resources, many of which are found in Australia and require open pit or strip mining. And the brine resources that are in production today are typically found in South America. And the way that they are produced is through large evaporative ponds called salars. So that's not an option in Alberta, where we don't have that hot, dry climate that would allow us to do so. It also uses a lot of land, which we would not want to do, and we know that we wouldn't receive, approval to do that. So direct lithium extraction technology is not only the key to unlocking the resource, in that it efficiently and effectively extracts lithium from our brines, it also uses about less than 3% of the land of those typical processes for mining. So we are on a clear and well-defined pathway to commercial operations. We're not going to go too much in detail about that here, but what we're doing this year is advanced engineering studies. We're moving through that pathway. We are advancing our commercial regulatory and permitting process, and that's one of the very great, wonderful things about operating in Alberta that's unique to us, that many of our peers, particularly in the rest of North America, may not benefit from that clear and outlined, efficient regulatory permitting pathway. But all those things are going to come together to enable us to build the first commercial lithium processing facility in Alberta. And we're all very excited to be doing so. The company at E3 is about 30 people strong. All of us come from Alberta's energy industry. So I'm very passionate about starting a new industry here in Alberta, all of the jobs that we might be able to create, and how we can repurpose the oil and gas skill set, know-how, to the future economy of lithium and critical minerals. All right, we are going to move into a little bit more about our resource and the market. Over to Chris.
Excellent. Appreciate that, Robin. And I think looking at the lithium developments in Alberta, in Western Canada specifically, we have a very unique position. We have a very secure jurisdiction relative to how lithium is produced elsewhere in this world. And Robin mentioned some of the processing methods and mining methods to produce lithium. But of note as well is the fact that this lithium is produced in the Atacama Desert in Argentina and Chile, in the outback of Australia. Most of that gets refined into China, where they have big refineries built to process all of those materials. And so while the molecules of lithium may be coming from those places, most of that is refined into battery products in China. And I think what Alberta has and what Saskatchewan as a Western Canadian jurisdiction has is some of the largest untapped resources for lithium on the planet. And I think that can't be understated. A lot of people talk about Bolivia as being the last untapped source of lithium, and really, truly, it's the province of Alberta. So Robin mentioned our resource base. You can see it here. The blue and orange is the Bashaw district, which is where the majority of our resources under measured and indicated lie. 16 million tons is 5 times larger than the entirety of Canada's measured and indicated resources put together. So very significant size of opportunity just in that alone. It doesn't include the Rocky area here, and it also doesn't include the growing jurisdiction, the Estevan lithium area in Saskatchewan as well. And there's some other Alberta players north of us up near Grand Prairie. So there's a very, very significant opportunity for us to develop this. E3 is leading the charge and outlining here shortly, and we'll talk a little bit about this today, the pre-feasibility study. And in that, it's going to talk about how we're going to do it, and most importantly, how much it's going to cost, which is a very important factor to being able to move a project forward. And so looking at the landscape then, E3 put this land package together back in 2016, 2017, with the help of actually Liz Lappin, who's a BMAC member, who's I see on the call as well, pretty instrumental in building this land position that we now have in South Central Alberta. And this is Farmers Fields. This is the heartland of Alberta, and we operate like oil and gas. And I think that that's an important piece of the story, because the industry that we were moving into and how we're regulated is identical to the primary industry in the province today. And by that, I mean, we pump a fluid from a well and we bring it through a pipeline to a central facility where you process it. And that happens in the oil and gas industry. It also happens and will happen with lithium in much the same way. And that allows us to be able to advance this project with some certainty. Regulatory certainty has been developed and is in its final phases of being ratified through Bill 82 that was passed into law a couple of years ago for regulating brine-hosted minerals, which we are. So a lot of those initiatives started in the early days of E3 and now are seeing them come to fruition and reality. So that's a bit about where we are in the world. And looking at the next slide, maybe just a little bit about the market. So why lithium? Where is it being used? Why is it so important? Why are we just developing these resources now? And the answer to all of that really focuses around the solidification of the lithium-ion battery as being the choice for moving electrons around. And the energy density that you're able to achieve with a lithium-ion battery is unsurpassed by any other technology. And what that does for the world is enables us to move electricity around very efficiently in a very light manner, so very transportable. And when you look at something simple like your phone, everybody has a phone. Every single one of these phones has a lithium-ion battery. There are two things that enable that phone to have the computing power. Think about a computer in the late 90s. Our phones are far surpassed in terms of being able to overpower in terms of their processing speed. And you compare that against the size of the machine that would have been able to do that, or the size of a cell phone back in the 90s. And the real advantage has been the chips and the battery, because without a high efficiency, very light, very small battery, the computing power would not be possible. And the same is true with electric vehicles. And that's where the majority of the market is now moving towards in terms of where lithium batteries will get consumed, is in electric vehicles. And the real advancement started in the early days with some of the major OEMs, and then Tesla really taking this forward. And that was where the impetus for E3 came, was looking at the predictions of how much lithium Tesla was going to consume in their vehicles, and then moving that prediction into, well, what happens if another car company gets into lithium? And what we soon realized is that there just simply was not enough lithium on the planet to supply even what Tesla was going to predict, let alone if some of the other companies got into it. And so we started to look at this resource base based on that. And for the first 4 or 5 years, a lot of the technologies and the batteries were still being developed, and Tesla was really the only EV company out there. And then during 2020, that whole landscape changed. And we, as predicted, a lot of people were saying that that was going to happen, that we would hit a tipping point, and we certainly did over 2020. And then you look at what that means for supply demand fundamentals. Basically, what it's showing is that we're going to have a significant gap in the availability of lithium into the future, because of all of the factories that are being turned on here in the next little while to produce the batteries for all of these cars and all of our devices. And what that means is that we need a stable source of lithium. And there's been a huge global push to get that onshoring to a critical minerals domestic supply. So every single country is concerned about having their own supply locked in of these critical minerals, lithium being on the top of that list. And so having a project that has the size potential that E3's does in Alberta is significant to that movement. And I think that garners a lot of support, which we've seen from government funding and elsewhere. And when you look around at the daily landscape, if we look at the next slide, the technologies have come a very long way. And I think one of the big things to note, and Robin's going to talk a little bit more about this later on, about what direct extraction is and the successes that E3 has had. But when you look at the growing market for lithium using direct extraction and the technology that E3 and others have developed, this is becoming more and more ubiquitous. And it is still a new technology. So the first commercial operating plant outside of China that we will see operating here in the near future is a company called AirMet. And they have a project in Argentina, and they're commissioning that plant today, which will eventually produce about 25,000 tons of lithium. In China, there's probably about 80,000 tons of lithium already being produced. So this technology is in the early stages, but it is very quickly being demonstrated as a viable path forward. And what that means is that you've seen now companies start to pile into it, because the ability to produce lithium using this technology reduces your environmental footprint across the board, simply by having very small surface land exposure, very little interaction with the freshwater aquifers, which is impossible to avoid if you're mining or you're evaporating in South America in these salars. So the ability to therefore reduce that environmental impact and also scale very quickly puts DLE technology projects on the forefront. And so a lot of these companies, and you're seeing oil and gas companies on this chart, are getting into this because they understand it fundamentally. Because as I mentioned, the operations of direct extraction look very similar to oil and gas operations today. And I hand it over to you, Robin.
Perfect. So what does this mean for E3? So E3, when the company was founded, and Chris identified, along with our friend Liz on the call today, all the lithium that was located in the subsurface brine, there needed to be a methodology to extract that. So E3 set about to create its proprietary direct lithium extraction technology. We developed that in tandem with a resource from 2016, 2017 onwards. 2023 was a pivotal year for E3 and for Alberta brines in terms of de-risking, improving direct lithium extraction technology. So E3 ran a pilot plant out at the field. You can see some photos there of what it looks like. This was just east of Old, so about a 45-minute drive outside the city of Calgary, just headed north. You could get to this field pilot plant. And at site, under that tent there, we tested our proprietary direct lithium extraction technology along with a third-party DLE. And prior to commissioning and operating the field pilot plant, we outlined key performance indicators for lithium concentration, for impurity rejection, for flow rate ratio. And every technology that we tested at the field pilot plant and beyond proved to be technically successful on E3's brines. So it was a huge success in that at the field pilot plant itself, there were two technologies that worked effectively to extract lithium from our brines. And then we just outlined, many of you may have seen earlier this week, we just outlined that we went on to test an additional three third-party technologies. And that just speaks to how much DLE has matured over the last several years, that E3 was able to test all of these technologies, and they all proved to be effective in extracting lithium from our brines. So our brines, the grade of our brines, about 75 milligrams per liter in the Leduc aquifer. And some of the test results, the one that we share most frequently comes from the longest run at the field pilot plant produced by third-party technology. And that produced over 900 milligram per liter concentrate once the direct lithium extraction technology had produced a high concentrate eluate with high impurity rejection as well. So that matters because the higher the lithium, the lower the impurities, the simpler the downstream refining package is. So at the field pilot plant last year, E3 flowed about 500 meters cubed of brine. We processed 500 meters cubed through the two DLE skids, and then we tested additional 3 third parties off-site. So it gives E3 optionality. And what we have aimed to do for the first commercial lithium facility, we've always said that we're technology agnostic. And our primary goal is to get to commercial lithium as quickly as possible, get to revenue generating as quickly as possible. And so it's prudent to find the lowest risk, most proven commercial pathways to do so. So E3 outlined that it is going to be progressing with third-party technology for its first commercial facility as that most viable path to commercial operations that also can offer other things like performance guarantees, which is supportive of our project financing efforts. So we see lots of positivity with doing that, and we'll continue to evaluate options to continue to progress our our proprietary DLE technology for future commercial facilities. So it's the pace of maturation and how things have changed over the last few years has just increased in frequency, and we see that continuing, and it means really good things for Alberta's brines and other brines that are similar in composition to us throughout North America as being this high ESG way to meet North America's need for lithium.
Excellent. Just looking a little bit forward into where what E3 is going to be up to over the next couple of years. One of the big exciting things that happened at the end of the pilot plant was a clear pivot for E3 from a technology development company to what we were started off as, which is a resource development company looking to produce lithium products for the battery industry. And so that the success of that moves us back into this path. So we've got the pre-feasibility study, which is that report really fundamental to outlining a bunch of the critical pieces. The goal is to move right into feasibility straight after that and work a bunch on the commercial development side of things, which really for us, when you look at the next stages, we have an engineering piece to complete, which is the design of the plant, the design of the wells, and then there's the licensing, regulatory, and permitting, which really in Alberta starts with the consultation. And we'll be working on that throughout the year as we start to move forward with progressing this. And a lot of that really on the ground consultation starts after the pre-feasibility study, where we have a bunch of information that we can talk to the local communities about. And and in terms of how we operate in Alberta, the industry standard is consultation first, and that is how we see the world as well. So that's a very exciting phase to be entering into because it really starts to talk and solidify the plans that the company has, and getting those plans not just to the public markets, but to the local communities where we'll be operating in detail, and talking to everybody about what we'd like to do and how we see it operating. Into 25, we finished the detailed engineering, and really the next big lift is project financing. We have to build this plant. We have to finance that. There's lots of opportunities right now in the space, looking around at how projects are getting financed. And it's actually an interesting and very exciting place to be because of the thematic of the necessity for critical minerals, because of this growing demand and shortness of supply. You're seeing things happen in relation to the development of mineral projects that don't normally happen. Government support has been very strong, both in the US and in Canada. E3 has received $32 million in government funding to develop our technology and our processes because they are somewhat new and because of the opportunities that they unlock should we be successful in Western Canada. And that's not necessarily normal to see the level of grant funding that is coming to E3. And they've slotted more. There's right now about $18 billion worth of funding through all of the different programs that the federal government has announced to get critical mineral projects and similar projects like ours up and running. And then you see the OEMs and the battery companies supporting companies through strategic investment into the project to support the construction. So like I don't think ever before there's a real opportunity to build this project with financing available. And so that's a pretty exciting place to be because that is usually the big challenge that all companies like ours face at some point, is that we have to find the capital to build the plant. So we aim to be in construction in 2026 and then see that operating as soon as we can after that. One of the big pieces to this story, and I mentioned the size potential of the resource, and Robin was talking about 16 million tons. That's equivalent of about 150,000 tons a year that we can produce for about a 25 to 35 year mine life. And that 150,000 tons is about 2.2 million EVs annually. So it's a pretty significant opportunity. If you look around at the world today, the largest lithium companies are producing about 125,000. So it is a very significant piece of the demand that's going to be required here in the future.
Yeah, and just to put that quickly into a bit of a Canadian context, we were crunching some numbers recently, and E3, if once in full commercial production via multiple commercial facilities, so at that 150,000 tons per year, producing enough lithium for about 2.2 million EVs, we could turn over the entirety of the Canadian passenger vehicle market in less than 12 years, just with E3's lithium alone, which is interesting.
And looking at sort of where E3 and our advantages really lie, I think having this resource in Alberta, having secured the size that we have, the ability to expand, really sets E3 apart from its peers. This is a very significant opportunity. It's an elephant in terms of its resource. We've had very strong government support, federally in terms of funding, provincially in terms of funding, and provincially in terms of regulatory, which is where we regulate through, is the provincial government. They've been fantastic. They are, and our previous energy minister, Sonia Savage, really took the reins on this and pushed regulatory in front of us instead of coming behind us, which means that we have the regulatory pathway we need today. And the certainty that's regulated under the same regulator that manages oil and gas developments, because that's how we operate, as I mentioned. And so we have a very systematic way to go about getting our permitting out. And then just being able to produce a pretty high quality ESG product at the end of the day, I think is fundamental to, we're bringing our product into the electric revolution, and being able to do that with some ESG credentials, I think is incredibly important.
Okay, and that wraps up the presentation from E3. So I think, Sean, we're opening it up to questions now.
Yeah, thank you both very much. That was a great presentation and very informative. we're going to open it up now to folks, and I already see a hand raised, so I don't even have to get to my questions, although I probably will come back to some of those. So if you'd like to unmute yourself and ask your question, please feel free.
Hi, this is Chinonso Bedong calling from the province of BC's Ministry of Energy and Mines. I just wanted to kind of see if you'd expand on this point you mentioned about, the support you've received from provincial and federal governments. Just wondering if you've kind of entered into any sort of discussions with governments about, any kind of grant funding or loan funding about, for funding for you to build your future facility.
Chris, I can start and then you can tag in there. Great question, thank you. So we are in active conversations with different provincial bodies and with various federal bodies. Of course, Natural Resources Canada is a large department that's supporting the critical minerals industry through policy, the critical minerals strategy, and grant funding, the latest of which would be the Critical Minerals Infrastructure Fund. We're also have been in conversation with and are working with organizations like the Canada Growth Fund and the Canada Infrastructure Bank. So there's a lot of good funding out there for critical minerals companies like E3 Lithium. We have been successful, Chris noted, in securing 32 million Canadian of grant funding and investments. 27 million of that comes from the Strategic Innovation Fund. So that has really supported our development to date. I will say that for companies like E3, the funding required to move us through from the advanced engineering stage into final investment decision and then onwards to CapEx is significant. And so the support that we require will continue, and we're going to continue to actively engage and provide our thoughts on all of those and what should be available to help Canada to really boost its critical mineral supply chain and processing capabilities. Because the thing is, with a lithium resource like E3's and battery manufacturers out east, we should really be able to support the development of a Canadian supply chain to support those EV manufacturers with Canadian domestic sources of lithium and other critical minerals. The other way I'll quickly touch on in which the province of Alberta in particular has been supportive of the lithium industry is they have been very focused on developing regulatory frameworks, policies that support the development of the lithium industry in particular. And the most recent application of that is changing the licenses to the permits that we had to brine hosted mineral rights. And so it was just simply, we still have the permits that we thought we had, but it provides some certainty in terms of what you own and how you produce it. And it carves out some regulations and some direction that's specific to the lithium and brine industry that's different from, what a hard rock mine might use or what oil and gas developers might abide by. And so the AER has been a real leader in developing the lithium industry, providing that investment certainty and giving clear guidance not only to proponents like E3, but the landowners and everyone that we need to engage with to permit and build this facility. So that certainly has been very helpful in providing clarity and certainty to our development plans.
Yeah, and just to add on the federal funding for a commercial plant, and Robin touched on it. There's been a huge push by the federal government, led by folks like Minister Champagne, to build what he calls the battery ecosystem. And we've seen this, I think a lot of us who follow this have seen the federal government really push this forward. And things like the support for the battery factories that are IRA competitive. So they've gone out and tried to bring and have been successful in bringing several of the big automakers into Canada to build their batteries by offering competitive support to IRA. The other side of that is that they also have developed funding programs through Natural Resources Canada, which is focused on infrastructure, through Strategic Innovation Fund, which is ISED, which is focused on processing the raw material into a battery product. So keeping that supply chain local in Canada. Those are both $1.5 billion a piece. They really have only started to outline those. So the first 300,000 from the Enercan side has been announced. The rest of the 2.7 billion has not yet been announced of how you can apply for it, other than the general framework. And that is anticipated to be out shortly. And then there's kind of growth fund and opportunities with that, and then kind of infrastructure bank. And there's the list of organizations that are supportive of building a critical mineral supply chain are pretty vast. And I think that there's a very important piece to the story, which is that none of this is possible without the raw materials. So while you can bring a battery and support a battery company to build infrastructure for the manufacture of cathode or cells, if you want an ecosystem, you need to have the raw material. And I think that that's where you're seeing the support come from, is to grow that as well. So like I said, I haven't really seen the level of support for development of mineral projects in Canada like there are right now for critical minerals.
Interesting that in that response, Chris, you mentioned the battery manufacturers and what's happening there. One of the questions that we've got here is talking really about the customers and those that will be, purchasing this lithium down the road. Can you speak to, do you have customers already lined up? Are those things happening? Of course, there may be some commercial things you can't get into here, but can you maybe explain what an offtake agreement is and how that would work?
Yeah, I think there's some proxies out there. I mean, most of these contracts are confidential, and therefore the actual details are somewhat opaque in terms of the actual terms in the contract. There are some good proxy that you can get into, and I think what we're generally seeing now, and I can point to GM's investment in Thacker Pass, $650 million from GM to support the development of Thacker Pass for 100% of their 40,000 ton offtake. So they basically bought the entirety of the offtake, and this is a project in Nevada. And they also have a ROFR, a first right of offer on the second expansion phase of another 40,000 tons. And so that contract, the terms are not necessarily known, but what we're generally hearing from the companies and potential customers that we talk to is that these contracts are shifting. So it used to be that all lithium was sold under fixed price. So you'd agree to a price, and for the term of your sale contract, that would be what you get paid. Now they're moving more to a variable or index pricing based on spot. A lot of people are using the fast market spot price. And when you look at what that's done, you can also almost clock it exactly. The lithium price was trading around $80,000 per ton. And then you started to see these contracts get signed for variable or index pricing. And the spot price started to come down pretty drastically. And that's because $80,000 was never the real price lithium was being paid. It was the price that like a small percentage, less than 1% of the lithium in the world was getting paid on, because most of the lithium was being sold through direct sale contracts. So there wasn't a spot market. But as we started to look at using these variable price contracts, the spot price came down closer to the real price, which is generally expected to be somewhere between $20,000 and $40,000 per ton. And most contracts now, and most companies that we talk to about what they want, are talking generally that index pricing with a floor and a ceiling. And so therefore you have protection on both sides. You're able to protect your downside as a company, and the which is a floor, and the customer who's buying your product is able to protect their downside, which is a ceiling. And so, and because the other piece of this that's incredibly important that isn't really often talked about is the qualification. So day one, your lithium may not be able to go into a battery that goes in a car. It might have to go in a battery in some other application because of the demands of that cell in a car. They want to qualify it. One way to reduce qualification is, in terms of its time frame, is to work directly with your customer. And that's why these contracts are being, in my mind, geared the way they are, is because you end up with a very close relationship to customers. And this is why it's going to be a long time, in my mind, before you have a general like LME where you have a stockpile of lithium, and when you want it, a bag gets shipped out. I think that is going to be a long time away from today. I think a lot of the lithium will be sold today through direct sale contracts.
Right. A really simple question here, and maybe for us non-geologists, I don't know if you can answer this in a simple way, but why Alberta? I mean, we see such a huge, significant volume there in the West, of course, but particularly in Alberta. I mean, is there a way we can understand that as opposed to, what's happening in the East with hard rock?
I mean, the lithium in Alberta and Saskatchewan are all generally focused around one particular stratigraphic section. And the why it's there is something that E3 is actually investigating right now with a couple of universities. We've got a really interesting program happening with our geological team. And we don't really have a true answer today. I mean, I'm a geologist and I could arm wave for an hour about all the potential ways that lithium might have come into this aquifer. But the reality is we don't have a definitive answer, but we're looking at trying to get clarity on it through a bunch of research that we're currently underway with that E3 is supporting. And so the I guess the emplacement of it and why it's there is interesting to know, but it's not really necessary in terms of the fact that we know that it is there. And it sits in this geologic package that geologists refer to as the Devonian carbonate sequence. And we find it in a couple different porous units. So the Leduc is where the majority of lithium is held. It's a very porous, which means that there's lots of fluid in it with high permeability, which means that fluid can move around. And it's a very big positive rock. So a lot of fluid can be held in it. And that fluid is enriched with lithium. So, and then there's other opportunities as well. E3 announced a little while ago that there's lithium in the Nisku. And it's just demonstrating that this lithium sits in this package of rock in Alberta. And the Saskatchewan resources are Leduc equivalents in a unit called the Duperow. And so all of that really is demonstrates the size of this. The Western Canadian Sedimentary Basin is, for those who aren't familiar with it, is a very huge opportunity for fluid. So this is why there's so much oil and gas in Alberta, Saskatchewan, and into BC as well, is because of this basin and its ability to trap fluids. And the same mechanics of why oil or gas gets trapped in these rocks is the same that lithium has as well from a fundamentals perspective. And then very different from hard rock, as you mentioned, because the hard rock is a primary deposit. So it's like a spodumene, which is a hard rock granitic rock that has these spodumene crystals in it that are lithium enriched. And so you can mine that and you can separate that spodumene into a concentrated product that's about 6 to 8% lithium. And then that can be roasted, like all hard rock projects can be roasted, those sort of concentrates into and liberate the lithium into a lithium sulfate and then produce a lithium product that way. And the pros from what we're developing is that's already in liquid form. The processing is very simple. It's very low energy. It doesn't require the same sort of processing parameters that having to dissolve rock does. And that's why a large amount of the lithium that's produced in Australia, that's hard rock sources, is processed in China because it is an energy intensive process to liberate lithium out of that spodumene concentrate.
So really more about processing the resource you have access to and finding the right technology for that, I guess.
And that's what E3 has been doing for 7 years. And that's, now we're a leader in the space. We've got one of the most experienced direct extraction teams out there, and have utilized that team to develop the project in terms of being able to produce a product that we can sell directly to battery companies, which is our number one goal.
Great. All right, I think we have time for one more here. A bit of a long one, so I'm going to try to sum this up for you and make it clear. But really, it's around the advantages or disadvantages for you having a prairie location for your commercial facility. Obviously, some of that, I'm assuming, is due to being next to the resources, but are there other advantages or disadvantages in terms of going to market?
Not really. I mean, lithium products, if you're making a battery quality lithium hydroxide or lithium carbonate, they're salt. Effectively, it's a form of salt. So, and it looks just like table salt. And so it gets bagged and into drums and onto rail, and that can go anywhere in the world. There's a lot of talk of proximity to the main battery manufacturing hubs. The reality is that there's no resources that are proximal to places where the batteries are being produced. I don't think that that's a hurdle in any stretch of the imagination. I mean, when you look at where most mining operations, you're in Outback Australia, you're in Northern Canada, the logistics are very complicated. A lot of times you don't even have roads or power into those areas. E3's project area sits in the heartland of Alberta. We've got paved roads, we've got rail, we've got power, we've got all of the essential things that we need locally to build a project. And those are much bigger factors than the transport generally, if you have the access. And we're literally kilometers away from rail. So we just put it on a rail line and get it to market. We can go south into the States. We can go east into the district there, or we can go west and on to ship and go south as well. So lots of opportunities to get the product out.
And the other quick thing to touch on there, like Chris is absolutely right about the benefits of operating in Alberta. The other thing that we have to talk about is the workforce in Alberta, right? Because you produce the brine using processes that the energy industry in Alberta have perfected over decades. So fundamentally, we know how to produce liquids from subsurface up to surface. So that is a direct repurposing of the skill set that Alberta is best known for. So the workforce that we have access to is large, and the jobs that we can create are significant as well. We're between Edmonton and Calgary, really close to Red Deer. There's polytechnic institutes in Edmonton, in Red Deer, and in Calgary that we can work with for training programs as required. So the ready to work workforce that we have is a significant benefit as well. And there's no, like Chris mentioned, camp in, camp out situation, right? Our first commercial facility will be, give or take an hour drive north of Calgary, which is essentially, unheard of. So it's very accessible that way. And then for the product, like Chris said, you ship it on rail, you ship it on trucks. That might be the easier part. The tougher part is, finding a really great spot to build and operate this thing with a really great workforce.
Okay. I do see a couple more popped up here, so we'll try to get a couple more in. Have you tested the effluent from the DLE process to see if there are other minerals such as zinc and manganese that could be extracted?
Yeah, I mean, we have a very strong understanding of what is in the different product streams that come in and out of the process. There's lots of salt in this brine. There's lots of zinc and manganese. There is the development of trying to find if we should economically extract them. We haven't really run the course because I don't think that we see it as high enough concentrations. But there's lots of other stuff in this that could be produced, manganese products. A lot of the manganese chloride that is used in milking cows is still imported from China. We could make that. There's companies that are making cement board from manganese oxide and manganese metal. Magnesium metal, not manganese, magnesium metal and magnesium chloride. So lots of products that can be produced from magnesium, from calcium as well, including cement products. Calcium carbonate, for example, is something that we could offer. So there's a lot of stuff that I think we can make as byproduct of this, but we have an understanding of it, but our focus has definitively been on getting the lithium up and running. It is by an order of magnitude or more the highest valuable material in this brine, even at 75 milligrams per liter. So we are focusing on getting that up and running. After that, I think there's lots of opportunity to see and bolt on processing of other types of materials. And we will absolutely look at that because it's easy value add to add another stream of production that produces some revenue. But it's just not the primary focus right now.
Okay. Got to start somewhere, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Keep a focus.
The world is your oyster.
Right. Okay, one last one here, and there's been numerous references to the oil and gas industry and skill sets, and also technology and processes. So, what about pipelines themselves? Is that a way that can they be reused and used in this case for lithium, or are you looking at building new infrastructure in that sense?
Yeah, it's something that as we get through the next year of development, we will include in terms of an analysis. generally the infrastructure in this particular area is very old. And from an environmental perspective, you don't really want to use old infrastructure if you're trying to move these foods around. So it may be just the easiest and most certain way to ensure that we have control on all of the infrastructure, and that that the shape of that infrastructure, the quality of it, is to a standard that we accept, that we would probably put it all in new. Because then we have certainty on exactly knowing what is there and how, and the quality of that infrastructure. There are lots of pipelines in Alberta, and there is opportunities to use some of them that are fairly new, that are big enough that we can start to put the brine through. But those opportunities, when you start to rank them in terms of age and size and all the other things that go, they actually start to dwindle down, because a lot of them were designed to move gas. Especially in this area, a lot of them are designed to move gas.
Okay, great. Well, I want to thank you both, Chris and Robin, for your time and for sharing this informative information. I know there's more questions. If folks have them, you can put them in the chat, and we'll try to get to those offline and can send them out in the notes for you. So thank you again, Chris and Robin. Now we're going to move over to our IRAP client 5-minute lightning presentation. So I'm going to welcome and turn it over to Ryan from Telescope Innovations. And you can talk about your technology and a little bit about what your organization is doing in the lithium space. So I'm going to let you share here if you would like, Ryan, and turn it over to you.
Thanks so much, Sean. Let's pull this up. Okay, so I'm from Telescope Innovations. We're out on the West Coast in Vancouver. The company has been in business since 2021. There's about 15 of us here, operating out of a 7,000 square foot laboratory and facility up in Point Grey, close to the city. And the technology I'm going to talk to you today about is a lithium carbonate purification method that we've developed, and we've piloted it at 1,000-liter scale with Standard Lithium, which is another Canadian lithium producer that has operations down in Arkansas. So I'm going to walk you through how this came to be, our work in the lithium space, and also our call to action, which is just to look for additional commercialization partners for this purification tech. So a little bit about the company. We're a chemical technology company. It's a group that we generate revenue from contract research services. So we bring together a combination of robotics, online analysis tools, and artificial intelligence, and we use them to solve challenging problems in across chemistry, and that has targeted sustainability, so critical minerals, and also pharmaceuticals. And this kind of dual industry focus is very much born from our executive group. So the company was founded by Professor Jason Hein and his mentor, Barry Sharpless. Barry is a two-time Nobel laureate in chemistry. Jason Hein and him have both pioneered this approach of using robotics and chemistry labs to accelerate process development. And they have a lot of pedigree in the pharmaceutical world, developing methods for drug purification and drug synthesis. But it was Andy and Robert from Standard Lithium. They're the principals at Standard Lithium who had this idea of this cross-sector approach of bringing some of this pharmaceutical approach to chemistry to developing new innovations into the lithium space and the critical mineral space, which is, as the folks at E3 highlighted just moments ago, is a space that's very ripe for innovation, and we need to accelerate the rate that this industry scales to supply the electric vehicle supply chain. There's a lot of crossover in the requirements of what pharmaceuticals and battery raw materials need. Purities are exceptionally high of the materials that go into batteries, and they're also exceptionally high for the materials that go into our bodies in medicines. Large scale is essential, batch consistency, continuous operation. These are themes that are common across both industries. And the last one that I'll highlight which is the theme of this presentation, is the use of crystallization as a purification method. So lithium carbonate, lithium hydroxide, they are salts. They are isolated from a crystallization step. That is the last step in the flow sheet before, bagging it, milling it, selling it to the customer. But that crystallization step is what removes the lithium from the liquid phase in the brine. And so this is also common to the pharma industry. And so we've been able to translate a continuous crystallization method that was pioneered for drug purification and bring it back over into the lithium world. So to set the stage from a technical perspective, lithium isolation is very much a separations issue. So there's a lot of lithium globally. If you add up all of the known reserves of lithium, it far exceeds what humans need for electrification of everything. However, most of that lithium is very dilute. And it exists with a large number of impurities. So for every lithium atom in a brine, there's between 100 and 1,000 atoms of impurities. And so it's very much a needle in a haystack situation where you need to specifically isolate only the lithium from this soup that contains a vastly greater quantity of elements that you do not want. And so that selective isolation and the purification is very much the challenge of lithium brine mining. The way that this manifests is in a flow sheet that involves a number of steps. The first step being the direct lithium extraction, which is essential to concentrate that very dilute stream. But then after that, there's still a large number of polishing of that feed to remove the sodium, potassium, magnesium, calcium. I've listed a couple more, but there's a number of components that aren't listed as well. But there's a number of feed polishing steps that need to happen before finally a carbonation and then an additional purification, usually through recrystallization at the end. So you can kind of think of the flow sheet in 3 major steps, DLE being the first one, and then feed polishing being the middle chunk, and then a final carbonation and crystallization step at the end. And so our goal, our approach to this, was to reduce the cost of lithium refining by collapsing the flow sheet and eliminating a lot of that feed polishing. And the way that we did this was developing a crystallization method that could tolerate a lot of impurities. So we're able to isolate lithium in spite of it being in this matrix that contains a large concentration of impurity elements. And so our ideal flow sheet would look something like this, where you cut out a lot of that middle section where there's feed polishing that occurs, and you go directly from a post-DLE concentrate, so DLE plus a concentration step, go directly into a carbonation step, also called softening, and then go into a recrystallization step. And then this is where, on the right-hand side, this is where Telescope's IP resides. The technology works well in both the lab and at pilot scale. We have been operating a pilot with Standard Lithium in Arkansas for about 2 years now. And at the bench top, to push the limits of it, we started with, as an input material, only 20% purity, or 27%, so 73% of the material being salts that are not lithium. And after our recrystallization, we're able to get greater than 99%. We also did some reprocessing of technical grade to show the other side of the spectrum. In the pilot, we were able to develop the process further, adjust some of the operating conditions, and we're able to exceed battery grade, starting with lithium feeds that were as impure as 11%. This demonstration, I think, exceeds likely what is even practical. You would probably want to start with greater than 11%. Most DLE processes will exceed that. But we really wanted to show that the impurity tolerance of the crystallization step is very high, very good. So to complete the lightning round, our goal is to commercialize this tech expand it beyond our pilot with Standard Lithium. We're offering to demonstrate the technology for free. So to do a single experiment at the lab scale to process brine, show that you can take a DLE concentrate, turn it into battery-grade lithium carbonate with a single AI-enabled recrystallization step. And we're looking for partners to help license the tech and to bring it up to scale. And with that, if you'd like a copy of the slides, you're welcome to scan that QR code. And thank you once again to BMAC for hosting the lightning round today.
All right. Thanks very much for joining us, Ryan, and for presenting on that. Obviously, some very exciting things happening in the lithium space. We all hear so much about lithium these days that it's great to see the developments happening. Before we close, just a quick reminder about some of BMAC's work and some of the resources that are available. You can see here on the left-hand side the second version of our interactive battery ecosystem map. So we're in the final stages of revisions for our third version of the map, which will be released in the near future. So we're excited about this next version. We have a couple new views and many new enhancements on the map and also some additional data points. So watch for that. In the meantime, please check out this version that's available. And soon we're going to be kicking off our work looking at opportunities for developing battery hubs in Western Canada. So watch for more for that information soon. And if you have interest in learning more or participating in that work, please just let us know. So with that, I want to thank all of you for joining us today. And of course, to our speakers for providing such helpful, informative presentations. And of course, to NRC IRAP again. So thank you very much, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your day.